Hello everyone, my name's Charlotte Zamboni and I'm from Global Action Plan. We wanted to start by saying our heart really goes out to everybody in the middle of this crisis. It's really, really tough time, and we know an awful lot of people are either ill or really struggling. And we just want to pass our thanks on, along with everyone else, to all those who are working so hard to keep us well and look after us. It's an incredibly interesting time right now, and really heartwarming to see that we're coming together as a nation, and that compassion and care that we had in us all along, we're seeing so much of now. 500,000 people signed up to support the NHS as volunteers, and every day we're starting to see examples of individuals acting in a way that's really caring and compassionate, supporting their communities through all the different networks that have been set up. We were due to do a talk at the London Climate Change Festival, and it was going to be called Compassion versus Consumerism. We had some fantastic people lined up to talk, and we were going to talk about some really big, meaty issues. Lucy Siegel was going to share some thoughts about fashion and how fashion can exist in a world where new isn't something we'll be aspiring to. Wayne Hemingway and Jacques Peretti were going to do an amazing talk on what an economy can look like in a sustainable world, and what are some of the big decisions we need to be taking about a compassionate economy. And James Woolman was going to talk a little bit about how we can be living in a sustainable way but still make it fun. We're not having that panel discussion now, partly because technologically it was tricky, mostly because it was going to be exactly that, a discussion, a conversation, a two-way session with our audience, because you can't really raise big issues like that without making them discursive, and we aren't able to do that right now. But it's not at all that we want to shirk from those big issues and those big questions, and if ever there was a time to be thinking about really big fundamental issues, it kind of feels as though that time is now. Who would have imagined when we laid out this plan for this conversation that we would have seen the kind of seismic changes in our society and the way we're behaving right now? We could never have contemplated change of that scale, and yet it's happened. And it feels as though there is a time to reflect on that. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes, a short while, just sharing with you some of the issues that we at Global Action Plan are starting to talk about, and I'm sure that you, with all your friends and your colleagues, are talking about too. And just stick really to the theme of compassion and consumerism, because they feel very central to some of the issues and changes that are going on around us now. And starting with compassion, it's really interesting because all along we've been compassionate. There's fantastic work that you may know about, Tom Compton does with Common Cause, and they've found and have long reflected on the fact that 85% of us, when you ask us, say that we prioritize compassionate values, that they're really, really important to us. But the tricky thing is that until now, we've always believed, when asked, that others aren't as compassionate as we are. We know we're compassionate, but when we're asked whether others are compassionate, almost as many of us say we don't think they are. And why is that? And why are we seeing so much compassion suddenly now? The media have got a role to play. I mean, the story that we tell about our society is that we're all driven apart. We've been in these Brexit years where the media narrative have been, families arguing over dinner. We're all set against each other. We're all self-interested. We just care about our own circumstances. And then we've been in a celebrity-obsessed culture where celebrities kind of illustrate kind of rather self-interested, sometimes, value systems that perhaps we all aspire to, where it's all about kind of individual gain and looking as glamorous as you can possibly look and having as many followers as you can possibly have. And all that narrative makes us feel that we can't really act on our compassion because we're slightly out of sync the way that society is. And then we perpetuate that because we then, by not acting on our compassion, don't show our compassion to others around us, and we continue to feel that it's not the norm. Well, isn't it interesting what's happening now? Now, actually, the media narrative has changed. There's headlines, yeah, there's a few headlines about we're stockpiling loo roll, but there's more headlines about how many have signed up to help each other. The COVID solidarity movement gaining hundreds of thousands of different examples of people standing together, pulling together. And that amazing moment on Thursday night where we all stood outside with our neighbours and we banged pots and we whooped and we shouted for our own NHS, the ultimate expression of our societal compassion. So I guess the question for us is, we are starting to feel that compassion is a bit more normal. What does that mean going forward? How can we hang on to that sense that compassion is normal? Because ultimately compassion is going to be not only the way we get out of this immediate horrible crisis that we're in, by caring about each other enough to stay at home and stay away from each other to protect the vulnerable, but compassion is actually ultimately the answer to the environmental crisis too, isn't it? Because if we care not just about ourselves, not just about our immediate community, but the wider world, we'll act in a way that is beneficial to that wider world. And we'll lend our voices to those who've got the power to make sure that they act in a way that's beneficial to the wider world. So consumerism, the other rather meaty topic that we were going to debate in this session. And what an interesting time to be talking about consumerism. I mean, firstly, to say people are struggling terribly at the moment with financial worries, and it doesn't feel an appropriate time to be starting to question the structures of our economy when we're experiencing such difficulties. But it does feel an interesting time to reflect on a personal level about whether the way we were living was actually a good thing for us and whether it actually made us happy. We know that consumerism is incredibly damaging to the planet, and we know, all of us really in our hearts, that we were using more resource than we could possibly sustain. But I guess we felt that it was on balance a good thing, and that having something new and having endless choice were good things. And what are we starting to realize now? Is there a few reflections? Did we need that much choice? Am I just glad to get some tea bags now? Did I need to feel that there was endless amounts of choice in the tea bag aisle? And now I'm at home and I'm not seeing my friends and not having all that pressure to wear something new and different every day. It's making me start to realize that actually that's not really who I am. It's not really what I'm about. And actually those values that perhaps we thought we all held, those values around the fact that we were what we owned, now can we question those a bit and think, well, am I the kind person? Is that what's important to me? And thinking about, you know, that sense of what we did with our time. It's a really interesting question for us now, isn't it? When we're not out shopping anymore, we've got more time. What can we do with it? There's the 5 ways to well-being from the New Economics Foundation, and each of those lists different ways that you can spend your time. Do take a look, Google it, take a look, because there's all sorts of really interesting research that says that if we behave in a way that's good for our well-being, that's good for the planet too. And it's obviously going to be good for us right now and the struggles that we're all going to be having emotionally in the face of this catastrophe that we're facing. So we're having some of these conversations. There's a lot of other conversations happening on social media about the world that we want to go back to, and thinking about this little chance to reflect and think a bit more deeply about the way that we live, and ask some of those questions of ourselves that perhaps we never thought we'd get a chance to ask. We've seen fundamental changes possible. We're right in the middle of it. We don't know where that's going to lead. We don't know where we're going to find ourselves. But let's all chat now. Let's share as much as we can. And let's hang on to these great examples of compassion. Let's share with each other through COVID solidarity and any of the other hashtags around, so that we can capture this sense of ourselves as these compassionate people. And then we can use that to perhaps hold ourselves up when we go back to a world where we get tempted by those manipulative ads that make us feel that consumerism is who and what we are. We'd love to hear any thoughts that you've got and to carry on with this conversation. If you would like to email info@Global Action Plan, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to work together in thinking about the kind of future that's going to be good for us and good for our planet.